hosting number for you, and this is how we're getting the final few trading days of the month of April started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Frontier Opening Bell. And in South Africa, Tileto Zwane. Good morning.
Good morning, Boasen. It's lovely to see you after a very long week.
Yes, it's been a very long week. Thank you so much, Tileto. I'm sure you've got a whole lot packed into the new week. We've got a few more days left in the month today to Wednesday, so we'll take that to effective to the 1st of May. But first, just a quick rundown, as always, on Africa's stock markets review. The South African markets had a very big jump, 1.4% Friday. The Nairobi stock market was 0.31% in the green, 107.57 on Friday, despite the flooding in Nairobi and across the country, a very heavy rainstorm. Of course, Mauritius got a bit of that earlier last week, and the market was closed for a day on the island of the Indian Ocean. In Egypt, the market started in Cairo on a very negative note, roughly 5% in the red all through last week. The Cairo stock market was in the negative territory in the red. Now sank below the 26,000. Now it starts in the new week, even below 25,000, 24,639. Whatever is biting the Cairo stock market with the recent deals being made with the IMF, the World Bank, the Saudis, the UAE, the whole portfolio investments, and why they're turning their back on the Egyptian market. The news on the street was that more devaluation of the currency, the Egyptian pound, is being tactically being asked for by investors who are asking for more premium on Egyptian risky assets. Let's take it to BRVM. The Côte d'Ivoire, French-speaking West African stock index was better by 0.31%, just standing at the doorsteps of 220 on Friday, while the Nigerian market finished the week 1.39%, broadly speaking, in the red. Friday was 0.02% at 98,151. So let's go on to East Africa and check with the top stories making the headlines as we start the new business week, despite the flooding in Nairobi, the biggest economy on the East Coast. Of course, the biggest telecommunication company, that's Safaricom of Kenya, will also be reporting its full year 2023-2024 earnings. That will be coming up later next week. Keep an eye. Everyone is salivating over those numbers. It will also reveal how much progress Safaricom of Kenya is making in the new market in Ethiopia, north of that country. So keep the eyes on those numbers. In the meantime, Kenya is planning a $2 billion PPP. That's a public-private partnership airport in Nairobi to decongest and reduce the pressure on the existing Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Just about a week ago, Ethiopia made a similar announcement of about $2.4 billion airport project in Addis Ababa as well. In the meantime, Kenya's online food and groceries delivery companies made a total of $103 million in 2023. That's a whole lot of money coming through from 2020, 2021 pandemic period, sit at home, work from home, everything from home. The deliveries in groceries and foods and others are still making a pile of money, even as we adjust to the new normal. And finally, in East Africa, Dubai companies looking to lend South Sudan $13 billion in exchange for 20 years of discounted oil delivery from the country. That's just north of Nairobi, Kenya as well. That's from the Sahel region. But let me take you very quickly to Southern Africa. And I'm sure Tuleto has a whole lot more on the table this morning. But before that, let me touch in West Africa, where the trial started for Alex, where Nigeria is planning a new $10 billion diaspora investment fund. That fund will be managed by any of the firms that are signaling their interest to do that. The idea is to tap into estimated $25 billion diaspora inflows or remittances into Nigeria. Today at about 11 o'clock local time, we've got the Nigerian Exchange Group annual general meeting. The directors and the shareholders will ratify the appointment of the new group CEO as well as the financials for last year. In Côte d'Ivoire, of course, the country is looking to avoid a cocoa export default after a rate hike, while Togo is heading for a very crunching or controversial legislative elections today, Monday, the 29th of April. And the IDA 21, all heads of state across Africa and the vice, as well as the finance ministers, are already in Nairobi. Of course, they will be stepping into a lot of flooding, as it were, there. But with the red carpets, of course, all of that ready for the IDE21. That's the International Development Association Replenishment Fund by the World Bank. That fund is scheduled to, is all put together to support Africa on a concessionary note. Nigeria's vice president is leading Nigeria's delegation today. The chief host is, of course, President William Ruto, the president of Kenya. And the BRVM, that's the Regional French-speaking exchange in West Africa, is looking at the Global Green Growth Initiative. They have an MOU together that will help green bonds flotation on that exchange based in Abidjan, the financial capital of Côte d'Ivoire. Let's go to Southern Africa. Of course, to keep talking about Southern Africa because Celeste is just looking at me. But again, she's angling to move on with the week in review. But you've got a couple of news in the headlines, by the way, because the trial started for those who allegedly stole hundreds of thousands of rand from President Ramaphosa's farm. It was a controversial issue last year, but now some of those thieves have been caught and the trial have started. In the meantime, Mr. President has approved $95 million military extension in Mozambique, while Transnet's CEO Phillips says the revenue by this company is likely to surprise to the upside and that the reforms of the logistics agency are on track. The head of the central bank in Zimbabwe says ZIG 125 will no longer be printed in notes, but will be in coins. That's part of the update we got from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe as far as the new currency is concerned. And the RTG of Zimbabwe reporting full year 2023 revenue 288% to the north, net profit up by 515%, and cash from its operations was better by 222%. On an analyzed basis. So I'm handing over the button to Leto Zwane.
Thank you so much, Boasen. Yes, that's correct. The Pala Pala case has been a massive issue in South Africa since 2022. In 2023, the South African Reserve Bank actually found that the president did not break any exchange rate laws. So we look forward to seeing what the findings or the outcomes rather will be.
Yes.
But then moving on to South Africa, South Africa has been accused of playing on all sides when it comes to foreign policy as the country seeks to expand its position as the leader in the global south. South Africa, as we know, heads towards the national elections on May 29. These have been dubbed the most important elections since 1994. The West has increasingly accused South Africa of taking more sides with China and Russia also. We've seen that South Africa has refused to take an actual stand on Russia's war in Ukraine. South Africa has also been quite vocal in the pro-Palestine campaign against Israel. And this, of course, has upset or raised concerns, rather, in the U.S. and the European Union. We know, for example, last year, the U.S. ambassador to South Africa accused the country of selling arms to Russia. Of course, this was not proven to be true, but there was a lot of tension. So we're seeing this persist again this year. Moving to former South African President Jacob Zuma made his first public appearance last week as his party sought to dispel speculation that he was ill. Zuma, who is leading the campaign of Umkhonto weSizwe party, this is a new party that he has formed to actually, go in. Contest the elections, failed to attend a series of the party's events this month. And then this led to local media speculating that the president was actually not feeling well. Also last week, very interesting, Bloomberg reported that Namibia's oil potential could one day match that of Guyana, a country on Southern America's North Atlantic coast. Significant discoveries have been made off the coast of Namibia, and the latest the find is by Total Energies. The chief executive officer of Total Energies, Patrick Powinyane, and said that there's a big chunk of oil in the waters of Namibia. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries has pledged to help Namibia to become a significant crude producer, widening the nation's path to join the cartel. And then back in South Africa, the country's Reserve Bank published its monetary policy review last week. South Africa's bank governor, Lesetja Kganyago, warned again that rate cuts may eventually occur, but then they will occur at a later time, and that the cuts will actually be smaller than initially anticipated. He said the reason for this is because of sticky inflation, as it has become very difficult to bring down those prices. But then the rates for longer narrative, was further intensified by the U.S. Latest economic data. While the U.S. GDP numbers came lower than expectations last week, the GDP deflator was higher than anticipated and accelerated from 1.6% in Q4 to 3.1%. This data would fit the higher for longer narrative that has been dominating news. In the end, concerns about persistent price pressures won, and markets are now saying that they expect the Fed to only start cutting rates in November this year. Last but not least, the Central Bank of Botswana kept its benchmark interest rate steady for the second time running at its meeting on April 26. At 2.4%, borrowing costs in Botswana remain at the lowest levels since July 2022, as the inflation outlook for the country improves. The central bank now expects inflation to average 3.2% this year. This is much lower than the 4% seen in February, and they say this is a result of reduced domestic demand and international food prices. Botswana's annual inflation rate dropped to a 7-month low to 2.9% in March 2024. So we saw Governor Kealeboga Masalila say that they expect inflation to stay below the preferred target until the third quarter.
Yes, very interesting to let to there looking at last week. But of course, I'm sure this is the final few days of April. So I'm sure taking us to the first few days of May, by the way. So I'm sure they have a couple of items on the calendar, as it were. Talk to us about that briefly.
Yes, indeed. In the last week of April, on Tuesday, we'll see South Africa publish its balance of trade. The country's national treasury will also publish the latest budget balance. Also on Tuesday, the South African Reserve Bank will publish private credit demand for March. Nedbank, one of the country's biggest 4 banks, forecast that private credit would have remained subdued in March at 3.4%, reflecting the general weak economic environment. This reflects the higher interest rates that the country has witnessed. We know that South Africa's repo rate is at 8.25%, causing household finances to be weaker and also fading consumer confidence. So not very good news on that front. Also on Tuesday, the Reserve Bank of Malawi will announce its interest rate decision. The central bank lifted its benchmark lending rate by 200 basis points to 26% in its meeting on February 1 to curb inflationary pressures and to restore price stability. The committee noted that an intensification of inflationary pressures during the fourth quarter and said that it also anticipates that inflation will remain elevated for longer. The lagged effects of the exchange rate realignment, higher maize prices owing to the anticipated lower maize production, as well as worsening inflation expectations were the main reasons that the MPC of the Malawi Reserve Bank shifted its inflation outlook upwards. On Wednesday, Seychelles will publish its balance of payment, and on Thursday, May 2, South Africa will publish the manufacturing PMI for April. Thank you.
Very interesting week as it looks, as always, on the calendar. A very busy week for Southern Africa with a number of countries reporting, as it were. And I'm sure as soon as we get to the 1st of May, There's also going to be quite a bit more of those headlines, economic and core economic data coming through, especially the PMIs, as it were. But thank you so much there to Zwane in Johannesburg. Let me quickly touch up and just put the icing on the cake for the show today with the North African corridor with OCP Group, that industrial behemoth listed on the Casablanca stock market, raising about $2 billion via Eurobond to fund its green transition. And that tells you the size and the power of what OCP Group represents, having petrochemical, fertilizer, a whole lot in its portfolio as a big and iconic company in the Morocco and the entire North African market. And of course, one of the biggest industrial manufacturing concern also on the African continent. If you move on to Egypt, you see the country is sending delegation to Israel in the latest effort to broker a truce between Israel and the Hamas. The whole issue around Gaza and Rafah and what have you is all that problem still on anyone's radar, and Egypt is always there to look at how to make a truce and get a ceasefire in place and get humanitarian needs to those who really need it, and if possible put an end to that war. The ITFC, the International Trade Financial Institution, has held meetings with on the sidelines of the ISDB, Islamic Development Bank annual meetings in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, held meetings with Djibouti, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, and Uganda. And finally, Tunisia reported its monthly trade deficit shrank 4.16% in the month of March to 1.54 billion Tunisian dinars. And those are the headlines as we start the new week. Remember, this is how we're finishing up the month on Wednesday. Tuleto, thank you very much for being part of it as we start the week that takes us to the month of May. I'll see you back in May. More like that. Tuleto, back on Monday. That's going to be the other side of the weekend. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for watching.